Hello, America. I'm Mark Levin. This is Life, Liberty, and Levin. I have a great guest, Shelby Steele. How are you, sir?
I'm good.
It's a great honor to see you.
Thanks for having me.
I've been a fan of yours for years and years and years. First time we're meeting.
Well, it's mutual.
Thank you. You are an author, columnist. You've done documentary films. You're a senior fellow at Stanford's Hoover Institution. You specialize in the study of race relation, multiculturalism, affirmative action. You were born in Chicago, January 1, 1946. Your father, Shelby Sr., was a truck driver. Met your mother, Ruth, as a social worker while working for the Congress of Racial Equality. Mm-hmm. You hold a Ph.D. in English from the University of Utah, an M.A. in sociology from Southern Illinois University, a B.A. in political science from Coe College, Cedar Rapids, Iowa. Your latest book, it's a great book too, is Shame, How America's Past Sins Polarized Our Country.
Well, thank you.
And yet some people consider it controversial. I don't. I consider it common sense. I'll give you an example. You wrote a few months ago in the Wall Street Journal on this so-called protest with the football players taking the knee during the national anthem. Mm-hmm. Among other things, you said, it's not surprising then that these black football players would don the mantle of protest, because you say protest is something that black Americans have had to do for civil rights. You look at Martin Luther King, you look at Jackie Robinson in sports and so forth and so on. And you say the surprise was that it didn't work this time. Yeah. They had misread the historic moment. They were not speaking truth to power. Rather, they were figures of pathos, mindlessly loyal to a black identity that had run its course. So you say in the article, look, protest is a good thing. Protest sometimes is necessary, right? To get the vote, to get equal rights, to draw the attention of society and so forth. But this one fell on deaf ears. Yes. Explain.
Well, protest is central to the evolution of black American culture. It was protest that really finally won our freedom for us. Beyond that, it's always interesting to note that it expanded the idea of democracy. Democracy had all of the theory, all of the thinking, all of it before had never dealt with the clash between race and racism and democracy. Well, it was the civil rights movement. It was Martin Luther King who said, you have to go beyond race even, that democracy is universal. So that's a big part of the black American identity, and it's sort of seen as the test of your authenticity as a black. And yet this protest in the NFL made the point that this was kind of fruitless at this point. And I think the central issue behind what you're talking about is the fact that the oppression of black Americans is over with.
It's over with.
It's over with. I grew up, I mean, it was... We never thought there'd be an end to oppression. I remember being a teenager, I never thought that I'd live in a society that wasn't segregated. It happened. Now, are there exceptions? Yes, there are a few here and there. Will racism ever completely go away? No, it's a part of as I say in that article, it's endemic to the human condition, just as stupidity is endemic to the human condition. And so we'll always have to be on guard about it. But we're at a point where the old-fashioned method of protest is obsolete. We need a lot of things, but we don't need that anymore. We're at a point now where we are a free people and can pursue our lives as we would like to.
You point out in the article, in your thought processes, that's part of the issue. We are a free people. We are all a free people.
Yeah.
We are not an oppressed people. Right. Blacks are not an oppressed people. Quite frankly, Jews are not an oppressed people, and so forth. This is America now. Mm-hmm. There is a history where there's oppression, obviously slavery, segregation, and so forth. Right. But that's gone. And you say, and so some people are having difficulty coping with liberty. What do you mean by that?
Well, when you think about it, Black American culture evolved over 3.5 centuries, every minute of which they lived under oppression. And they adapted to dealing with the fact that their freedoms were going to be cut off. And they had to somehow make a life within all of those restrictions, and they did. And I think Black American culture is nothing less than heroic. I mean, they evolved. Look at the contribution like music and so forth. They achieved great things. The one thing we never had to do was to deal with freedom. That was precisely the thing that we would deny. So that's not in our culture in a vivid, clear sense, as it would be if we had been free, truly free. Well, we now are free, and freedom is, as the existentialists I think rightly say, a burden. It's a difficulty. It puts the individual in a position of being much more responsible for themselves, their own development, as individuals, and that's new for us. That's the idea is still that black unity, we just can be unified. That's the way ahead. Not anymore. You take yourself ahead, and that's the new and stunning, really, fact of American life that we're now facing and having to deal with.
Say of these football players who are successful. They're wealthy in comparison to other citizens, whatever their race.
Mm-hmm. They beat me.
They beat you. They beat a lot of people. Mm-hmm. And they're treated with great respect. I mean, in terms of the fans love them. They want their autograph. They buy things with their numbers and their names on it. And yet they protest. What exactly are they protesting?
They're just stuck. Again, one of the ways we adapted to not being free was to think that our group identity was again the way we were being black and being down with the cause. That was the way we were going to get it. Unity was everything. And if you are authentically black, you're going to do what blacks have always done to one degree or another. You're going to protest. Well, the irony is that you're making $15 million a year. If you're making vast amounts of money, doing successful in every way, you're free. There's nothing for you to protest. Nothing.
How about social justice and equality and phrases like that? I hear that's what people say they're protesting.
You got all the social justice you need. Again, I lived through segregation. The freedom we have today is absolutely remarkable, and we as a people have not yet absorbed that. We've not absorbed the fact that our problem is no longer racism. Our problem is freedom. We have to learn to deal with freedom. And the only way to do that is that it's going to have to be grounded in individual responsibility. That's the only chance you have with freedom, is to take charge of your life and make a life for yourself. Ralph Ellison, one of my all-time favorite writers, talks about this, that the group is the gift of its individuals. The goal is not to create the uncreated conscience of your race, but to create the uncreated conscience of your face. And that's 50, 60 years ago. That's on the money. That's in his great book, Invisible Man.
Do you think part of the problem is the daily recitation of groupthink, group rights? You get it a lot in our universities and colleges. You see it on television a lot. Politicians balkanizing the nation in order to empower themselves and their party and so forth. Isn't that part of the problem?
What I think you're pointing to is definitely maybe the overriding problem, which is, and we don't talk about it very much at all, is white guilt. And that keeps feeding whatever blacks are doing that's not helping them, thinking of themselves as nothing more than members of a group of protesting and so forth. It's white guilt that keeps feeding that. What is white guilt? We always, we think, well, do I wake up in the morning and feel guilty about, black Americans? No. White guilt doesn't have anything to do with actual feelings of guilt. White guilt is the terror of being seen as a racist, as a bigot, that now pervades American life. All of our social policy, our culture, everything is touched by this anxiety in most of white America, understandably, given America's history, that they're vulnerable. They have this vulnerability to being disarmed of moral authority by being called a racist. I can use it as a weapon. I can say, I went on a Levin show. Let me tell you the way I was treated. And it explodes. So it constitutes, that is black power. White guilt is black power. They're virtually one and the same. And one of the big problems we have is that you talk about universities and political correctness and so forth. These are all ways in which white Americans say, I'm innocent. I don't feel this way. I'm not a bigot. I'm not a racist. I'm innocent. And white guilt causes this drive to prove and establish innocence. And so then we have a whole generation of black leaders who do one thing and one thing only: milk white guilt. And we're at a moment. I thought this protest was telling in that regard, kind of a point at which the culture may be turning, because it was a fruitless protest. It achieved absolutely nothing.
Could the culture be turning, but the elites digging in?
That's well said.
Because more and more when I watch these debates on television and so forth, people very easily, almost casually, call people they disagree with racists. If they disagree with a political agenda, if they disagree with a particular issue, and most of that's coming from the left.
Yes.
What do you make of that?
Well, it's white guilt is meant to disarm you of moral authority. It's when they scream racism all the time, they're saying you're a racist. You don't have the moral authority to deal with whatever issue or problem we're dealing with, because you're a racist, and so therefore you are morally compromised, and your moral authority, you don't have any moral authority. And this is the seduction that people on the left have fallen for. They then are given as a reward the idea of their innocence.
I want to pursue this further when we return, because I think this is very, very important. Ladies and gentlemen, you can watch me on Levin TV on our crtv.com network almost every weeknight if you'd like to join us there. Give us a call at 844-LEVIN-TV, 844-LEVIN-TV. We'd love to have you. We'll be right back. Shelby Steele, I want to pick up on this issue of white guilt and the use of the word racism. I find it to be now an ideological tool of the left, more and more and more. If they disagree with a particular issue, and I'm generalizing, they disagree with a particular issue, then you're a racist. And somebody could be called a racist who's not a racist, has no history of being a racist, hasn't done a thing in their lives that indicate racism. Do you see this too? Absolutely.
It is, the other side of that is that because whites are still so vulnerable to that charge of being a racist, that is the power, the entire, all of the power of the American left is based on that guilt, that susceptibility, that terror of being seen as racist. Not to introduce the presidential campaign, but Hillary Clinton in her deplorables statement, now famous, is a perfect example of saying, these people are bigots and racist. I am innocent. You vote for me, you prove your innocence. I offer you an identity of innocence. Being liberal, being left, is more an identity than anything else. It's the way I think of myself as a decent, civilized human being. And those other people are contemptible. And so it works on a cultural level. Now I think the irony is that this is beginning to fade. You see signs of it cracking at this point, that people don't take Maxine Waters seriously anymore. That's not Martin Luther King. When he came along, there were obvious, terrible things, this terrible discrimination behind every word he spoke, and everybody knew it, and there was really no debate about it. Racism was everywhere. When the era of Maxine, as some people now call it, there's nothing behind the protest.
But if you have a political mindset or a political party or a political ideology that has to sustain this argument, even though, as you say, this is a horrific past, but we're free. But the Democrat Party, not all the people in the Democrat Party, but many of the spokesmen and leaders of the Democrat Party, they're not free from this. No. Is it because they seek to keep people or stigmatize people, or what's that all about?
If the essence of American liberalism, I think, is the pursuit of innocence. Innocence of specifically the ugly American past. And that's why, because I am free of that ugliness and innocent of it, that's why you should vote for me. That's why you should let me change this aspect of the university system. That's why you should let me do any number of other things, not because I have better ideas, that I'm a better problem solver, but because I offer this identity of innocence, which is now I think, big political problem that we have not identified up to this point. But it is that susceptibility, that vulnerability in the political arena. People are going to play on it. They're going to exploit it. And I've seen this, spent my adult life in universities, and you see reasonable, civilized, decent people just fold up. And when the charge of racism is even hinted at, and they begin to sell out the quality of the university, the one thing they invariably always absolutely do is lower standards. Remove Western civilization from the curriculum. What are you doing? You think that's going to make you innocent. It makes you stupid. It makes you destructive. Mm-hmm. And black Americans, we need to understand the magnificent, careful evolution of Western civilization as much as anybody else does. Mm-hmm. So you're keeping us from it and saying, well, it's not, it's a bunch of white guys. I don't care. I need to know and be informed. I need to identify with Western civilization. I am a Western person. Black Americans are a Western people. We evolved here in the West, thankfully.
In some cases, longer than most other immigrants or peoples who are in this.
Certainly. We've been here since the very, very, very beginning and so forth, and shot the first shot in the Revolutionary War, Christmas Maddox, and so this is it. And now we're in a position, and I understand this as a black person, when you come out into freedom after that. And the society admits it was wrong. And you come out suddenly into freedom, you're going to say, well, something is due me. You did that to me for 3 centuries.
Is something due the person?
And there may be something due. America tried its best to, we've got several $1 trillion on social programs and wars on poverty and so forth. We've tried to do that, and it hasn't worked. And that's the realization I think we're just about getting to, is that, yeah, we had a hard time. I had to watch my father be discriminated against in every way. The unions wouldn't hire him, wouldn't take him in. So I know all about it, and there's a part of me that says, wait, whoa, I'm not ready to fully identify with America yet. That's a bit of a stretch. The cold fact is, it doesn't matter. We can't change the past. We can only move into the future. And in the future, we have to identify with this country. It's the greatest country there ever was. There's no, what other system are you gonna go to? And it's hard emotionally for people to say, well, we need to get some sort of a paycheck, something for what we went through, some reparation. That's what reparation, the discussion, it's a psychological sort of imposition of what justice, in some cosmic way should be. But that kind of justice doesn't very often exist in real life. And if you look at history, you see other people have been set free. They didn't get paid off for their suffering. We're not going to get paid off for that. And if we keep holding out, demanding that, we will pay the price. We'll get weaker and weaker. Today, black Americans on almost every socioeconomic measure are farther behind, farther behind whites than they were in the 50s and 60s.
And when we come back, I want to ask you why. And this central point that you've written about before, the denial of liberty.
Mm-hmm.
It's almost sort of a genuflecting type argument.
Mm-hmm.
And relying on the past to deny the future.
Yes.
We'll be right back.
Live from America's news headquarters, I'm Todd Pyro. 3 people dead, dozens injured in a deadly bus crash in New Mexico early this morning. The accident began when a car rear-ended a pickup truck on the highway around 2 a.m. A commercial bus heading from Denver to El Paso, Texas, tried to evade the disabled car and its driver, who was ejected, but the bus driver lost control, rolling the bus onto its side. It was then sideswiped by a semi-truck. 8 animals have now died at the Audubon Zoo in New Orleans after a jaguar escaped from its habitat. The jaguar got loose on Saturday, killing 4 alpacas, an emu, and a fox. A 5th alpaca and a 2nd fox died today from their injuries. The jaguar was tranquilized by a vet team and returned to its enclosure. Zoo officials still unsure how that jaguar escaped. I'm Todd Pyro. Now back to life, liberty, and Levin.
Shelby Steele, we've been talking about these forces that are in play. Why the almost myopic focus? I watch some of these professors and so-called civil rights leaders, almost the myopic focus on 150 years ago. I believe we ought to learn our history. I believe we ought to know our history. I mean, that's crucial. But really almost a rejection of the fact that we have liberty.
Absolutely. We think that freedom is a lie. And I'm doing some work on this at the moment, but one of the things that come out that are people who have been long oppressed and who finally come into freedom, one of the problems that goes along with that is what I call bad faith. If you've been a victim of America's hypocrisy for 3 centuries, now you're free. Now you don't know what to do with the freedom, and so you've got some problems there. But the easy thing is to simply say we're not free, And now we're down to microaggressions.
Safe spaces.
Yeah, safe spaces where I am determined I'm going to do whatever I need to do to convince myself, to make it up in my own mind, that I'm not free. It is a tragedy that is striking Black America. It is something perfectly normal. It comes out of 3 centuries of being of victimization. The idea that you don't trust what they say to you. All these white people, you don't trust these elites. Bad faith is cunning. It's being smart. It's saying, I'm not a sucker. I was a sucker for 3 centuries. I'm not going to believe these people again. I'm going to keep a distance. And you end up keeping a distance from your own opportunities. And you miss them. And you hurt yourself. How
do you break out of this as an individual?
It is a damn hard question. Certainly, one of the things I think would be we will eventually do is to express this, to say, look, freedom is if you're going to never get married, to start having babies in your late teens, and dropping out of high school and so forth, you're going to suffer, no matter what this goes on elsewhere in the society. You will be the one who pays the price. What we as blacks have to do, and this is what's so damn hard, and I acknowledge it's hard. After going through all of that, we all have that pain in our families, in our selves. But we have to accept the fact that it's over with. And we're not going to get perfect justice. We're not going to get reparations. If you give me $20,000 because my grandfather, which he was, born a slave, what am I going to really do with that $20,000? It'll probably be gone in maybe a month or two, maybe a few days. But what's it going to do to change my life?
What's it going to do to change your thinking?
You can't get reparations.
Right. And what's it going to do to change your thinking?
Right.
Or the thinking of those who keep pressing the so-called elite.
That's right.
Keep pressing the agenda. They're not going to stop, are they?
Well, this is what this is why liberalism has become. They are, what is the term they use for people who help out or keep addicts involved? What's the word? It escapes me at the moment. But they facilitate our problem, that psychology by which we say freedom doesn't exist. White guilt forces them to facilitate that and to then claim this proves we're not racist. There's a symbiotic bond between Black America and white America, and there always has been. Takes different forms at different times, but right now, since the 60s, white Americans have been guilty. And again, as I say, it's not that they feel guilt. It is that they feel this pressure, this threat, and so they behave guiltily. It's the behaving guiltily that is the problem. I'm going to do something. I'm going to actually take microaggressions seriously. I'm going to hire people to teach you about that. When it's a joke, if black people, how did we survive this long? If we were,
if every little thing,
every time I grew up calling me, an N-word. That was once or twice a week. You wouldn't. I refuse to accept the idea that we're that weak. If we are, then there's really no hope.
Lots more, but first, check us out most weeknights on Levin TV on crtv.com. We'd love to have you there. We have great programming on CRTV. Give us a call and sign up. 844-LEVIN-TV, 844-LEVIN-TV. We'll be right back. You know, the broader issue to me is assimilation. Assimilation into the culture, assimilation into certain traditions and beliefs and values, universal truths, eternal truths. And when a society doesn't have that, a society can't succeed. It balkanizes, it tribalizes, it breaks apart. It's a war with itself. I personally see this with immigration, that you have a political party that doesn't believe in it. You have corporate entities that keep, different languages. They press button 1 for this and button 2 for this and so forth and so on. And it's very concerning to me. But is it even a bigger problem? Because assimilation is Americanization. That's what's intended.
Yes.
And the point you're raising here is it's not just necessarily with immigration, this issue of Americanization. You've touched on this too. It's crucial for the people who are already here to be Americanized.
Yes.
What do you mean by that?
Well, if you don't like the word American, you can use the word modernity. The modern world functions in a certain way. It's the result of a very long centuries and centuries of evolution, and through an enlightenment, a reformation, a scientific revolution, on and on. That's no joke. You don't want to, what would its competitor be? Well, when we talk about assimilation, that's what one of the things oppression did to black Americans was prevent us from assimilating, saying you're not going to learn these things. You're not going, and we, of course, in many ways we did anyway, and adopted those principles and values and so forth. But now there are these politics and this guilt that we've been talking about. And if I'm white now and I'm guilty and I'm liberal, I want immigrants to be unassimilable. They're then a victim class. And as a victim class, then I'm the one who is going to be responsible, and I anguish over their victimization, and I therefore take moral authority and power.
You bring this up, moral authority. Is this whole notion one of superior moral authority, where the left then looks down at everybody else who doesn't agree with them? Is that what's going on?
What the left says today is we are good people, and we are redeeming America. The great moral principle that they subscribe to is redemption. Look at how ugly we were. It's people like us. That's why we're elite. That's why we're special. That's why we are so sophisticated. Is because we're fighting against that ignorance and that backwardness. And so if immigrants come to America and say, good to be here, we're going to now become Americans, that doesn't make the left happy. That doesn't give them any, because they're not going to be victims. So, you look at the problem we have now with immigration. The people on the left immediately characterize it as a moral problem of a people of color being oppressed once again. And therefore, we have, it falls on us as liberals to somehow redeem America from its abuse of people like this. There's a lot of power. There's so much power, and the rewards are so high because you get an identity. And I see this in any number of people. I'm going to vote for somebody on the left, liberal, whomever. I'm in with the good people. I'm not in with. Look at how abhorrent white people were. Oh, and I'm above that. I'm above my Uncle Tony, who used to use the N-word all the time at the dinner table. I'm the opposite of that. Mm-hmm. So we've given America this avenue to redemption, and the left has turned it into a vein of power, and it is now, I think, destroying us. because it cuts away at everything that is timeless and beautiful and important, difficult, certainly, but very important.
We'll be right back. Shelby Steele, affirmative action. Will it ever end?
Boy, not for a long time.
Why?
Because for many reasons, but again, one of them, to go back to this whole guilt thing, is that without affirmative action, without the idea of a preference that you grant victims, the left has no power, has no way to keep this whole machinery going. And so they just find new and different and more inventive ways of using preferences to send the signal that we are innocent. At Harvard University, 8 to 9% of every single freshman class has to be black. If you didn't lower the standards for admission, probably only 1% would be black. They would be ones who had earned it via merit, but they would be greatly outnumbered by those who want it as a racial preference. And what, in a sense, white America is saying is that we're redeeming ourselves this way. And without us, we'd go back to the old way, discrimination and racism and so forth. So, we've got the finger in the dike. And so affirmative action is just diversity is its sort of new incarnation. A wretched idea with all sorts of perversions follow from this idea of diversity. I could tell you a story about that.
Yeah. Doesn't it help camouflage the failures of half a century of the left's agenda?
Yes, because Black America has to face some. Why are we poorer now than we were when we had no freedom? After 50, 60 years of freedom, why are we poor? Well, whites have a bill coming due as well. Why have you betrayed every principle that made you great, that made America great? Why have you betrayed all that? In the name of what? In the name of your own innocence. Your innocence is a corruption. It facilitates everything that's not good in the minority community. You are the problem now. It used to, as I say often, the old-fashioned segregationists who called me the N-word all the time when I was growing up, I prefer them any day to the modern white American liberal who exploits me and Black Americans for this moral authority that it then uses as its base. I'm being used now just as a slave was being used, to overstate it a little bit, but not much. And it breaks my heart. I visit campuses, I talk to Black students, and they tell me all sorts of stories about their roommates or white roommates saying, you wouldn't be here if you weren't black. So affirmative action ruins the very people it claims to help. Mm-hmm. It dispirits them. It takes the incentive away for achieving excellence. It ruins them. Mm-hmm. And then you get, it's no doubt then you get groups like Black Lives Matter that just take this to wild extremes, claiming how victimized they are.
We have to take a break, unfortunately. We'll be right back. Shelby Steele, 10 years from now, race relations in America better or worse?
Very good question. What makes me feel, and I'm basically an optimist, and I think in the long run we pretty much always work through these problems, though as painful as that working may be. So I think we ultimately will be able to do that. And today you see signs of the left's of this guilt and so forth, its preoccupation with its own innocence, and you see that beginning to crack a little, and people are saying, no, I see through that. You're manipulating me. You're not pointing to some real human pain here, some real difficulty. You're just manipulating me. You're talking about a micro. I'm supposed to get up in the morning and believe that?
I hope you're right. And I want to thank you. It's been an absolute honor to meet you and talk to you.